Welcome back. On Wednesday, over 20 million South Africans went to the polls to vote in a general election that was billed as the biggest one since the end of apartheid in 1994. The new parliament will decide, technically will decide, the country's new president, but step forward, Jacob Zuma. We've spoken to him more than once, a couple of times in the past year. Here, in this particular clip, we looked ahead to his possible presidency.
Assuming that the ANC stands that have become the president of South Africa, really is to achieve what the ANC stands for: a prosperous South Africa, a united South Africa, a South Africa with a thriving economy, a South Africa that will be out of the trap of poverty, a South Africa with a population that will be educated, skilled, to be ready to handle their country.
Joining me now is Knox Chitiyo, the head of the African programme at the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI. A great acronym, RUSI. Now, first of all, what sort of a president do you think that Jacob Zuma will be?
I think he will want to go down in history as the people's president. He will want to be the president who is in touch with the grassroots of South Africa, because that's where the ANC has to concentrate its forces. I think he won't want to be distracted by the various issues around him. So I think that is where he's going to concentrate his energies.
And so as a president, he'll be pretty dynamic, won't he?
Yeah.
Decisive and so on.
He will have to be quite decisive, because as we know, there's a number of issues around him. There's also issues within the ANC itself. There's different ideologies and belief systems within the ANC, which he also needs to deal with. And of course, there's the economic issues. He has to deal with poverty and social empowerment. So he has to be quite decisive on all these issues, and he has to be decisive quickly.
And he's had these embarrassing legal cases, which he's finally been extricated from just in the last week or two. But those have concerned people partially, although they're now cleared, as it were. But people, in examining him, and I must say, talking to him, I think he's impressive. I mean, but the Economist had a piece saying, on the one hand, he might be very good, or on the other hand, he might be terrible. And on balance, we think he's going to be very good. But there was no middle area, in fact. And in other words, he's really going to catch the tide of Africa at this moment. Do you think that's likely?
I think so. I mean, there's been a lot of sort of demonization of Zuma, that, you know, many people are very concerned by all the issues, and they worry that the ANC will be very unconstitutional and tamper with the judiciary and so on and so forth. I think he will make enormous efforts within the first 100 days just to reassure people and show that the ANC is still very constitutionalist at heart, and that they are doing their best to keep within the parameters.
And what do you think he'll do about Zimbabwe and Robert Mugabe?
Well, for now, the Zimbabwe question is still being handled by Thabo Mbeki, who's really the sort of South African mediator. So in that sense, I think Zuma will, for the time being, take a back seat to Zuma and the SADC initiatives on Zimbabwe. But certainly he will have to keep an eye on Zimbabwe. There's Zimbabwean refugees in South Africa. The government of national unity is still relatively fragile. So he will have to keep an eye, and if need be, particularly when we have our own general elections in a couple of years' time, he will have to perhaps take some steps to ensure that it passes freely and fairly.
Well, let's hope that they always call him the big man, the big man in Africa, that the big man has an inspired future. Thank you very much indeed, Knox. Very good to have you with us.
Thank you, Sir David.
Now, what's to be done about Somali pirates? As we speak, they are holding some 18 cargo vessels and 300 crew members hostage, and who knows, that may have changed in the last few minutes. The waters off Somalia have become a free-for-all, and no amount of military hardware and know-how appears capable of stopping them. Is there an answer? That's the question. With me is Rear-Admiral Phillip Jones, the commander of the EU's first ever naval operation to fight piracy, and Roger Middleton, who's authored a research paper entitled Pirates and How to Deal with Them for the Institute of International Affairs. Phillip, let's let's start with you. Why is this subject? It seems as though it's multiplied in frequency in the last few months, even more than before. Why is that?
We've certainly seen an escalation in the last couple of months, and that's an escalation that's come on top of a significant presence of naval ships from around the world, both from formed organisations like my own European Union force, from coalition maritime forces, from NATO, and a range of other nations like the Indians and the Chinese and the Russians. And yet, that notwithstanding, the pirates have returned to the fray in ever greater numbers and are challenging us as to how we can do this. So their tactics are evolving, their capability is expanding, and we need to be able to match that.
And obviously off the coast of Somalia, how many of the pirates are Somalis and how many other nationalities, roughly?
Well, it's very hard to get precise information and intelligence about who they are and what they're doing, but we believe that most of them are Somali. It's a clan-based approach to piracy, different types of Somali clans doing, in many ways, different types of piracy off the different areas of the Somali coast. But we very much have to fight what we see. It's hard to get real hard information about how they're structured and how they go about their business.
And with the situation where three pirates were killed by the US snipers and so on, is that going to up the dangers and the stakes? I mean, are the pirates going to be seeking revenge, or?
Well, it's difficult to judge exactly how the pirates will respond to that, although we are watching for any indicators we can glean in this week that comes after it. The two significant elements we're watching is, firstly, we've clearly enhanced the level of deterrence against the pirates by showing them that we will, for the right reason and at the right time, fight back. But secondly, also, we want to see very carefully what they will do about the rest of the hostages they're already holding.
Yes, let's turn to you, Roger. I mean, we also had an example of one captured person dying this week as a result of the French. Do you think there's going to be additional firepower, dangers of death on both sides?
I think that's a worry, but I think it's worth bearing in mind that both those cases, the rescue of Captain Phillips from the Alabama and the rescue of the French citizens off their yacht, were slightly unique in that in both cases the hostages were being held on very small boats out in the middle of the ocean, so it was easier to mount a rescue operation than it would have been if they'd been on board a large cargo ship, for example. So they're not really typical cases of piracy in Somalia.
Right, not typical in that case. And you're the man, obviously, at the head of this battle, the EU battle, to do something about this. I mean, do you think that these pirates are better and better equipped, or are they roughly static in that sense?
We are seeing evidence that particularly the Somali pirates that come out into the Somali basin, the ones that operate much further offshore, are doing so with a better sense of equipment, better ability to coordinate with each other, and better ability to work out where they think the juicy targets might be, the most susceptible and vulnerable merchantmen. And simply to come as far off the coast as they do, 400 or 500 miles in some cases, is signs of serious organisation and serious ability. Up in the Gulf of Aden, where they have to go less far to find the merchant ships, there's still evidence that some of the attacks are fairly impromptu and not necessarily well coordinated. They're just looking for a good target. So we're seeing both, I think.
And there's that young Somali teenager going into court in New York, isn't it? That's another, comes back to the same issue of who has custody over the legal procedure.
Absolutely. I mean, piracy is for pretty much all of history been recognised as a universal crime and something that needs to be stamped out. So in some cases, countries do take pirates back to their country of origin to prosecute them there. And I think particularly in this case of the pirate who was involved in the Maersk, Alabama instance, because it was such a high-profile case in America, there's a desire in the States to see justice being done in America. But really, I think what this shows, and the malleability of the pirates' operation shows, that a solution to this will only come from land in Somalia. Whatever we're doing on the ocean, it's like a sticking plaster.
But would, as some people say, would blasting these pirate ships out of the water, would that work?
Well, we've looked at all sorts of steps we might take to take the fight to the pirates more effectively. We need, as a military force, to balance what we do against international maritime law and the Convention on Law of the Sea. These, at the end of the day, are gangsters. They're conducting armed robbery on the high seas. So we must make sure the force we apply against them is proportionate and appropriate to the acts they're conducting. And then whether we take the fight to them on the land, I think needs to be balanced against what that would achieve and what the likely resultant situation in Somalia is. And it's far from clear what the second-order consequences of that action might be.
That's right. The pirates have such a good image in movies and so on. And we should underline that these guys who are out there on the high seas are not Keira Knightley in Pirates of the Caribbean. It's something a bit more serious than that. Thank you both very much indeed.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Many thanks. That's all for this edition of Frost Over the World. My thanks to all our guests. Next week, in a special programme, I'll be in India, where they're in the middle of a crucial general election, just like South Africa this week. I hope you can join me then. Until then, goodbye for now.